What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is Josh Levine. Josh brings over a decade of experience training and coaching youth, high school, and college athletes. Josh founded the Fortis Academy and has trained athletes in all sports, including football, hockey, cheerleading, soccer, lacrosse, basketball, and rugby. Josh grew up in Bloomington, Minnesota, and played high school hockey and ran the 100-meter sprint and track and field. After high school, Josh played 1 year in the USHL for the Green Bay Gamblers. Josh then attended Princeton University, where he earned a degree in International and Public Affairs with a certificate in Near Eastern Studies. Josh, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Appreciate it.
Well, hey, I know at Fortis Academy, you guys are training a wide range of sports. Obviously, in your bio, it said it, but before we just press record here, we were talking about that as well. There's a little bit of a madness, I guess, going on in youth hockey right now. At least, that's the sport that I know the most about, and I know how the year-round hockey is going. You guys are working with other sports. What are those sports doing, better than hockey, that those crazy youth organizations, are running into?
Yeah, I think the one thing that other sports generally do better, and this is not necessarily the fault of, hockey administrators or anything like that, is they do a really good job with having more consistent schedules. So hockey is one of the only sports that has this major schedule variability. And to some extent, I think we use the excuse of ice is a little bit harder to reserve. There's some more complexities there. You have to resurface. It's not like a turf field, even an indoor turf field where you can go on the hour every hour. But that schedule variability makes it a very difficult sport to be accessible for a lot of people because you never know when you're practicing. It can be at different times, different days. And we ask parents to do that at the very youngest ages. And I think that's something that other sports do a better job of. So soccer, lacrosse, basketball, most of those sports are able to provide parents with a consistent schedule throughout the week. Hey, we're going to practice on Monday, Wednesdays. We're going to do games on Saturdays, Sundays. Here in Minnesota with hockey, it's like there is no concept of having schedule regularity by just implementing some very basic rules, like games on the weekend. Like, why are we doing a game on a Tuesday night with the PWB team when, there's almost no ice relative to how much ice we need? Why are we doing a game? They can play 2 games on a Sunday, and parents will love it, versus trying to rush home from work and get to a 6 o'clock Tuesday night game in a different city. And so I think that's one of the big things that I think other sports do better than hockey, or hockey is doing worse than other sports. I don't know how you want to look at it. But the other thing that's unique to hockey, I think, is the locker room issue. I've got young kids, and so, soccer, there's no locker room. You just show up to the field and you go kick the ball around. And I think hockey has not figured out how to manage some of the issues that come out of the locker room sort of atmosphere that kids are placed into at a pretty young age. There's instances, at least here, we do a lot of leadership and character development training. And when we talk to associations, we're hearing all the time about kids who are locker boxing and videotaping it. Now, that's nothing new, the locker boxing thing. The thing that's new is people are videotaping it. And then, it gets pretty brutal sometimes as well in terms of what's actually happening to a kid, and so this is all happening within the context of the locker room. You're seeing stuff also with phones in the locker rooms, which obviously they're not supposed to be there. But that's a major issue in hockey. At least I've seen instances here in Minnesota where some instances are happening that are they should never be happening. But we allow the kids to bring the phone in there. It's like you can't have it out, but bring your phone in. Well, it takes 2 seconds to take a phone out, take a picture. And so I think hockey, relative to other sports, this one is not other sports are doing it better. It's that we have to deal with this, and we're not dealing with it in a good way, I would say right now. We're just sort of letting it kind of hit it. We're very, very reactive. I think this is not a knock against Minnesota hockey or USA hockey, but generally we're very reactive to these issues versus proactively trying to figure out ways to reduce these incidences of locker room bullying behavior or just misbehavior in general that should not be allowed or tolerated. And we have a culture in hockey of just allowing it, behaviors that are just fully unacceptable. I think the last thing that hockey is doing worse than other sports is just the cost issue. And I think we are ramping up our costs more and more and more. Just even here in Minnesota, my own anecdotal sort of what I'm seeing, now it's advisors for $2,000 to $8,000 a year, and then it's the AAA teams or the Tier 1 teams, which are, really more like $10,000 here, which is a lot when you look at travel, which is not necessary because we have a billion hockey players within, a few miles of each other. So you have all of that kind of ramping up. And I think hockey, all sports are getting more expensive, and in youth sports, the youth sports landscape in general is not necessarily a positive trending one for the last 3 or 4 decades. The pay to play stuff is just kind of amped up more and more. But I'd say hockey has sort of taken that and just like sprinting with it. And some of the pricing structures are just kind of getting a little out of control. It feels like it's a keep up with the Joneses type thing. And so I think hockey's also doing that a little bit worse than other sports. And so it's harder for us to recruit from a wider demographic to get more and more kids playing hockey. It's something that we're trying to do within Fortis, sponsoring some initiatives here in the state of Minnesota, but that's another one that hockey could do a better job at.
I think it's funny hearing that because, when I think of Minnesota hockey specifically, they have the biggest high school tournament in terms of like public high schools too, where there's no paying to play for that. You see a lot of guys that play in those high school hockey tournaments and then they end up playing college and pro hockey. So it's not like the payment structure needs to be there to play in better leagues like a part of the country that, hockey might not be as popular. So it's interesting to hear that. I think I want to dive into a little bit of like what for, each of those issues. And I want to kind of work backwards, starting with the cost. Like how do we fix that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, in one sense, some of the really absurd pricing is just, parents kind of chasing after the shiny object. And so it's a misunderstanding that parents have about how athletic development works. So this idea that you can pay your way to another level. Now, okay, can your kid get really good training and go from a B to an A player? Sure. Okay. Can they go from C to A outside of maturation gains? Probably not. Like there's going to have to be like some testosterone gains for a young male that, maybe he's later on the maturation curve, and some good training. Okay. And then if we go further than that, okay, are you going to be able to play college hockey or professional hockey? We do leadership parent seminars, and I tell the parents that was determined pretty much at conception. I mean, whether that kid is going to be able to do it, you cannot train that because there's so many kids playing now. The world is flat. People can be discovered in Europe. They can be discovered in Canada, Russia, the U.S. There's good players coming out of California, Florida, Minnesota, Massachusetts, you name it. It's a very competitive landscape, and it's just got a whole lot more competitive for Division I hockey, which we're seeing now with the more Canadians being able to come into the league.
For sure.
So it's just going to get worse. So you have that FOMO it's a misunderstanding of how athletic development works. Like, oh, this is what's causing my kid to be really good. Or you see a bunch of good kids doing one type of training. I mean, they could be jumping on one leg and barking like a dog, and people will think, oh, that makes sense. Let's do that. All right. They'll pay for that. They'll pay for something that there's just no way. And so what you see is sort of this herd mentality. A couple of people go over here, and then a bunch of people try that, that fancy training method or whatever. So there's a little bit of that. I think more systemically, though, with associations, what tends to happen is the people that run the associations tend to be the most into hockey. They're the most willing to spend money for hockey. And so they don't really have a whole lot of interest in keeping pricing down. Like I've noticed, I've got a 7-year-old boy that's playing might hockey, and he sometimes has practices indoors on like a Thursday night. He doesn't need to skate on a Thursday night in Minnesota. He can go outside if he needs more ice. Who needs ice is the peewee, who's in the golden window of skill development. I'd rather have the peewee get ice because I know how the ice situations work around here, and there is an opportunity cost to that. And there's also a cost to just having more ice for the sake of getting, it's, what is there bad ice? There can't be bad ice, which I think there is. Some parents will tell me that, like, is there such a thing as just getting a bad repetition, just going out there for another hour of ice? And so I think that's the next thing, is having associations look at their touch counts. A lot of times I would love for someone to do a study to look back at Massachusetts and Minnesota community hockey and go, how many times a week was a 10U squirt player on the ice in 1992? How many times a week are these associations trying to put them on the ice now? The kids seem to be skating a whole lot more than I did when I grew up. I don't see skill benefits of this long term. I see how it sometimes makes a player really good at squirts, but I don't see how it translates beyond usually that segmented, like, okay, they're a really good squirt, but the advantages that they've built pretty much level out anyways by Bantams. So I think that's something as well. We need to look at it from the associations need to be looking at it from the perspective of how do we drop prices by just being a little smarter with our ice utilization, how much ice each team's getting, how much ice do kids need, and then kind of going from there.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've seen this too, and you've definitely seen the studies. Like players that I've worked with that might have grown up that way, where they're on the ice 4 or 5 days a week before they're through puberty. Like when I've seen them in the college or in the pro setting, they have the worst hip structure of everyone, and it's like that's damage that can't be fixed outside of surgery. And there's other players that are at the exact same level with them that did not grow up with that many touches. And not only are they healthier, but their skill level's the exact same. So
right.
It's like there's a lot more cost with not much more benefit specifically at that age.
Yes. Yeah. And we're seeing this all the time. And I do talk about this in our parent seminars as well, which is that you're basically looking at guaranteeing hip labral tears and impingement in the hip. And you're going to get that if you're going to skate that much. And what's happening is the kids are skating that much, and it kind of works when they're 8 and 9, although we're already seeing kids at that age who are having hip issues. But once you get to the beginning of that growth spurt where you have peak height velocity for males is average 14 and a half. So you look at like kind of that 13 to 14 and a half range where that generally it's on average, they're starting to grow faster, and then they hit their peak height velocity. And at that point, there's this huge delta between their skeletal system and their muscular system. So the joints now are taking on a greater force. Now you're seeing kids getting bilateral hip surgeries at 14 and 15 because of this. I'm seeing pretty much every year I know of someone at that age who's getting it. And I look at it the same way you do. I'm like, the problem here is parents need to understand we're competitive. We want NHL hockey players. We want to train the best of the best. We want whoever we're working with to do the best that they possibly can. Well, would you rather have your kid make an extra $4 million in the NHL, or would you rather have them be a better Pee Wee AA player? Like what would you rather have? I mean, and that's in the best case scenario that they actually make it. And, in the worst case, do you just want them to be healthier as an adult? And so, yeah, it's insane.
So that's kind of the first one that we went over. It's a little bit of education for the parents, but then it's also the touch points with the ice. With the locker room issues, is that more of an age issue that you think it's like maybe we should, do dress and drives until a certain age or restrict phones until a certain age? Like, what do you think the solution is there?
Yeah, I don't think it's dress and drive. I think it's probably the phone issue. I was just at a social media video game seminar for a team and their parents. So it was a full team of players and their parents just 2 nights ago. And my recommendation to them was no phones at the rink. Like, they don't need to bring a phone to the rink. When they're 13 and 14, they can learn how to say hello to an adult. My mom's not here yet. Can I borrow your phone to call my mom or my dad who's coming to pick me up? That's how everyone used to do it for the longest time. Kid will be fine. If there is a massive emergency, you're not getting a hold of them anyways, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do to help them just by getting on the phone with them. It's have them go without the phone. It doesn't work to have the kids come, and then you have all these coaches who are trying their best. I know one coach, they got a phone lock box, they put it in the box. They're having to do all these things to manage the phones, and still we're having incidences where things are being videotaped, people are being pictured when they should not. Obviously, they should not be. It's in the locker room. This cannot be happening. Get rid of the phones. They can't even be in the rink. They can't even come into the locker room. Therefore, you have to leave it in your car or somewhere else, because unless you want to set it out in the hallway and have it get stolen. There's no reason for the phones. I think that's probably the number one thing that would be an effective change that we can make.
Yeah, and you said it perfectly. When me and you grew up, there was no, cell phones and smartphones. There were some cell phones, but people weren't having those at 9 years old. I didn't have a cell phone until I was, 14 years old, I think. And realistically, like, you didn't need one for the exact reason you're talking about, because, like, who are you going to be talking to?
Right.
Because your parents are driving you or picking you up from the rink, so they're there. All of your friends are on the team playing with you, so they're there. Like, you don't need the phone. It's only going to be used in a bad case.
Yeah, here's another thing. I mean, if people don't care about the sort of the character issues with it, it also impacts their performance. So if a kid goes on social media 30 minutes prior to a game, day of, there's good studies on this now. It's actually going to reduce their ability to perform in the game. So, even from that perspective, just from a compete perspective, if I'm coaching a team, there's no phones, because just being on those things in the stands, scrolling, you're actively trying to use your brain to make decisions. Scroll, switch apps. Your brain's on overdrive. That's like, do I pass? What all the implicit decisions that you're making out on the ice, you're doing that on your phone. You're putting your brain into a state that's just not going to be ideal for performing and learning. So whether it's before practice or a game, I just think there's no reason for them to be in the rinks.
Yep. And then, kind of the last thing and the first thing that you touched on, the scheduling, like, is that just like the associations making the decision, like, hey, if you're on this Pee Wee team, you're going to practice on this day? Because, like, I feel once one team starts modifying their schedule week over week, that's obviously going to affect downstream the next team that would normally practice at that time.
So what you have to do
is, like that?
you basically have to take all of the available ice, and then you have to get really creative, because you have to say, well, sometimes our 10Us, let's say we have 3 10U teams, they might all have to practice together, once every 2 weeks. We might have to have the JV high school team that goes right after school. They might have to skate at 6:30 in the morning once a week or twice a week. I mean, we're blessed here. Like, some of the things that we would have to do is just normal on the East Coast. Yeah. When I coached out in Maryland, we only played games on the weekend. That's another rule change that would free up the ice to allow for consistent practice days, not necessarily times, throughout the week. And so it's a combination of sharing a little bit, just a little bit of pain, where, like, even one team, you have some of these youth programs, it's 20, 30 teams, 15 teams. One team every week has to do a morning practice on the day that they would be practicing to open up ice in the afternoon. You can do a lot of those little tweaks, and with the ice availability, at least that we have here, and if you did the games only on Saturday, Sundays, Friday nights, Saturdays, and Sundays, I think it's well within reach. In fact, I know I've done this. I've played this strategy out with a local association here. We were able to do this. So I'm pretty sure it's scalable, but it's something that the benefits of it would be amplified if everyone was doing some of those basic rules, like you do the games on the weekends versus during the week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's definitely scalable because, like you said, other places where hockey is popular are doing it. So it's not. Yep. It's not something, it's special to Minnesota where, they are doing something different and it's better. They're doing something different and it seems to be worse. So
yep.
Definitely room for improvement there. I think another big component is kind of the year-round hockey that's happening with a lot of these travel teams and everything. So, are there things that you're doing? We just kind of dove into the proactive stuff that you can do maybe, but if somebody's choosing to play year-round hockey, are there things that you can reactively do that you think, is making a difference right now?
Yeah. One more thing on the proactive front really quick, which would be to tell the kid and mean it that it's okay to play another sport. And what that means is, as a private entrepreneur in the space, you have to be willing to lose a little bit of money in the short term. So if a kid comes to me and says, can I play lacrosse this spring? I know that means he can't sign up for my full, whether it's gym or on-ice training program.
Yep.
That's fine. I have to be able to say to him, it's okay, go play lacrosse. I'll see you in June. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really hard. And I know from a systemic level, other sports have this issue where, like, a soccer club will say, hey, we're all about multi-sport athletes. The leadership will. But when you're on a team and you're talking to your coach at winter practice on a Sunday night in November, they're asking, why aren't you going to be at the game on Tuesday? And you have to keep explaining them because you play hockey or you play basketball.
Yeah.
Well, in practice, then you're not being multi-sport friendly. So that's one. Two, so reactively, though, in terms of strength training or just like, performance training, I think this, again, is where social media and FOMO has like just taken hockey parents off the cliff, which is, okay, so we want to train for hockey, so we want it to be hockey-specific training, and that's great, but then they want everything to look like a stride, and everything to be on the hips, and everything to be, just nice and low and burn the legs, and it's like, the problem with that is now your gym training is essentially you're playing hockey. So now you're playing year-round hockey, and you're layering hockey off the ice on top of it. Well, now the stimulus on the hips and the low back is just being repeated, right? And so now you're looking at more L5 stress fractures, more hip issues, more hip flexor pulls, more groin pulls, all these things. I think when I in particular have an athlete who's specializing too much in hockey or skating too much in hockey, I think the role of the performance coach is to counteract that even more so than you would in a normal program. So it's like, okay, we're really working on glute activation. We're really working on fixing anterior pelvic tilt. We're really working on strengthening the adductor muscles to reduce the likelihood of adductor strain. And we're going to do a lot of core stability and anti-rotation. We're not going to attach a hockey stick to the cable and just only do shots all day because that will make everyone think we're doing hockey-specific training. We're also going to do stuff that's just, dead bugs and front planks and things like that to just work on that core stability. And so I'm thinking off the ice, I'm trying to just counteract that on the ice stimulus. And then I'm also having to basically go, okay, how many times did you skate this weekend? I skated 5 times. Okay, buddy. Well, then we're not probably doing legs today on Monday because you're fried. And this is the issue with what the 5 games that you're doing is, one, you keep doing this on your hips because you just played 5 games, which is absurd at your age now. You're kind of post into that puberty stage. So now I have to adjust my programming for you. So I think it's a lot of adjusting programming. And in many ways, I think it's negative because we're not able to take someone who's an athlete. They're in that athletic training window, I should say. Like they can build speed and explosiveness and strength really, really well and faster than they ever will in their entire life. And, half the off season is basically blanked out because they're overtraining on the ice. But if you overtrain them in the gym, you will have injury for sure. So that's that's just how I think proactively we just have to look at complementing what they're doing on the ice, not trying to mimic it.
No, I agree. In season, for us, we're not doing anything probably that looks like hockey. We're not doing anything that probably looks like hockey in general anyways, because off-ice training is so general. The only thing that's specific to hockey is hockey.
Yeah.
Can you do certain things that can transfer better than others? Obviously, but that doesn't mean it looks like hockey. And for us in an off-season, we spend the first entire half of the off-season unwinding all of these bad issues that occurred over these months. And if, we're lucky enough that there's no NHL going on in July, so we don't have to worry about it. But these other programs, like, you can't unwind these issues if you never get out of them in the first place. So
yes.
You can't have the training look like it at all.
Yes. Yep. And that's Instagram's just fueling that because it looks cool. Okay. But yep.
I want to kind of transition real quick to the work that you do on the ice. I know you're on the ice in the summers with a lot of people. Your age range is wide. So there's obviously a whole lot of skill levels that are different than each other. Are there, certain foundational habits and skills that you're kind of driving home with your younger athletes? And are those similar things that you're also driving home with your older athletes, or kind of mixing those in as almost warm-up drills before they get into the more high skill work?
Yeah. I think that it's cool having having the perspective of watching kids from learn to skate through the travel ranks into the junior ranks and then all the way up into the professional level. Some things sort of stay the same, right? You always work on skating, and skating to me is fundamentally, like the early specialization side of hockey is skating. You do need to really learn how to skate and skate with good technique at a younger age. Like you can't start at 15. At least I don't think anyone's been able to, and then really learn how to skate well. You can later than most hockey parents think. Like you don't have to be 5 and have started hockey. It's okay. There's still some more time. I've seen kids start in 3rd and even 4th grade and become very, very good skaters. Beyond that, I think it gets demonstrably tougher year after year that you wait. But I think skating is something that's consistent through. I look at skill development for the youth as sort of like we're building some of those foundational blocks. So let's just take a couple of examples: an inside edge, a passing capability, just forehand to forehand passing, and forehand extension. I will rep those out a lot at the younger ages. When we get to the older ages, let's say high school, varsity, and up, that is going to start tapering off. We're not going to be doing a lot of that type of stuff, but we'll use it as a fine motor sort of warm up for our athletes. So like our college guys might do a stick handling circuit that's real in tight. You would never do it in a game. It's not meant to be game applicable. I'm not looking for them to have their head up the whole time. We're just getting the hands moving. We're just looking for some athleticism, just build that fine motor skill back, just working on underhandling, and then we're moving on. What I see at the higher levels is we're working on things that are very fine-tuned. So like as an example, working on like how to pick a puck off the wall, and we're repping that out. Like picking it up off the wall with your forehand, picking it up with your backhand, soft catching it so it's coming down the wall, and then I'm going to turn with it and pick it up off the wall at the same time, getting it up off the wall for breakouts or passes to the slot. And those sort of concepts aren't things that I'm going to be doing generally with youth training programming, because we're just trying to build some of those more basic foundational skills. But those foundational skills go all the way through. You do get a kick out of it when you got a group of peewees who think that their inside edge doesn't need any more work or their outside edge is good. And you're like, well, you literally do this with the professional players at the first half of the off season is just kind of what we're talking about in the gym. We're just resetting everything back to where it used to be. Your stride has declined throughout the year. Your edges and your glide have you gotten tired, so you're skating with suboptimal form. You do this day in, day out for however long, how many months. Now we need to reset it, and so we're kind of working back on those foundational principles with skating in particular, not so much on the puck handling side. But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that. I feel like hockey is the highest skill sport, just because skating in itself is a skill versus all other sports. There's some form of running, sprinting, jogging, but like you hear of guys like Kobe Bryant, they do like their 1 hour warm-up routine where they're doing the most basic, ball handling drills and shooting, but it's like, oh, but the peewee hockey player doesn't have to work on his inside edges.
Right.
It's like, come on.
Yeah. Yep, and the best guys in the world are working on that in the summer. We train out of one of the rinks where Andy Ness, who I highly respect, he works with the Minnesota Wild. He's a skating coach. It's every once in a while we get to see what they're working on, and it's awesome. Like he's working on basic edges a lot of times right in that early start of the off season, and very game applicable skills. He's not going down the route, again, going back into the social media thing. He's not going down the route of having the guys jump and do 360s and do all these different fancy drills that'll look really good on Instagram. He's working more on foundational skills.
Yeah, our skills coach does a lot of that as well, and it's so funny to see guys. If we're doing a lot of rehab skates and say there's 2 guys, one of them is known to be a really good skater and the other one is not, how they're going through the drills looks so wildly different for the good skater versus the bad skater because it's just been built in, and the more reps they get, obviously the better they get at it, but these are professional hockey players and even some of this is a struggle for them, so it's definitely still needed.
I've been amazed with how much skating improvement can be had with players that are at a very high level. There's a lot of technical improvements that can still be had for professional players, and some of them they're never going to be great skaters. So they're just always trying to get a little bit better. And their strides deteriorate pretty quick. And They're aesthetically not the most pleasing on the ice to watch, but they get it done because, back to the genetics idea, they were blessed, and they're fast and they're quick and they've got good speed of mind. So,
for sure. The kind of the last point I want to ask you about there, the attention spans of young players versus older players are obviously wildly different. I know I don't have kids, but a lot of my coworkers that have kids that play hockey, they're talking about their kid's favorite part of hockey practice is like an obstacle course that they do. So obviously you can't run a peewee or a mite practice the same way you're running a college or a professional. Is there ways that you're gamifying these skill sessions for younger kids to keep them wanting to come back?
Yeah, I think the way I look at this is, think about mites. So 8U. There's so much pressure to try to teach them, like, let's say, learn to stop. Okay, trying to teach a kid to stop in whatever grade, kindergarten, first. The first thing you should do is gamify the heck out of every drill you possibly can, and just do that for the foundational elements. Because if you give me a kid that's in third grade that can't stop but has been on the ice, has been doing a lot of games, coordination, balance, they've been falling down, getting up, they're athletic, they're moving around, I can teach them to stop in 2 minutes. Okay? Now, if you give me a first grader and you're just making me constantly try to get this kid to stop, and he doesn't have that foundational, just the body awareness, the development, the mental development, a lot of times is just not there. They're not able to process what you're telling them. Now your return on investment is so much worse. You spend 20 sessions trying to teach this kid to stop. And then we wonder why these kids can't stand practice, because we're trying to teach them stuff at too early of an age to keep up with the best kid in the entire program, who's physiologically older than his actual age anyways. So we're just chasing, what are we doing? I see that all the time. I think gamify more is better. A lot of times I look at practices and a Pee Wee B or Pee Wee C team in particular, but even A teams, the team would probably benefit more from just playing 3v3 without a coach on the ice than they would having the coach talk the entire time and try to teach them these concepts. Their attention span is too small or too short. They're not going to be able to absorb it, and it's a disservice to the kids. Gamify things first, and then what you should do then is, when you do teach kids skills, it should be acquired much faster and more efficiently if you gamify correctly, and then aren't always just kind of pounding skill development into them. I think that's a good principle to adhere to.
Yeah, even the 3-on-3, if no coach is out there, kids learn to stand and walk on their own. They'll self-organize and learn how to skate and stop, because that's what the environment needs them to do in those situations. So they'll fail over and over again, but at some point when it clicks, it's going to click way better than just trying to hammer these skills down their throat in a different way too.
Yep, and the research has shown that if they don't learn those skills implicitly, they won't be able to do them in a game. Because the game is at a speed that you can't consciously be like, okay, I'm going to move this way and then tuck the puck in and then pass it back door, because that makes that, by then the play's already down on the other end. You can't say that sentence even. There's not enough time.
No way,
they have to learn implicitly. And that's where the gamification, that's why we're seeing, at least here in Minnesota, I think we see this nationally too. You get some kids where you get them on the ice, their edges are great, their puck handling's great, their shot's amazing. You're like, this guy is NHL bound. Then you look him up really quick. Oh, they had 2 goals in high school varsity. How is that possible? And then you go watch them play, and then you connect the dots. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of, where we manicure the aesthetic of our training. It looks good. They do it lines ad nauseum. And then you watch them in a game, and you're like, they don't really know what they're doing, do they? Well, and you can't teach them now because they're too old. Everything's too rigid now. So doing this is, again, you want to be competitive, you want an NHL hockey player, do what Gretzky did. Let him play with a tennis ball, right?
Yep.
Do what Pavel Datsyuk did and let him play with a rubber ball and felt boots. Make them shovel the outdoor rink off too, like he had to, because no parents in Russia were doing that in the 1960s or 70s or whatever, right? So.
Yeah, no, and there's no coach that's going to be out there when you're playing the game either, so you need to learn how to do it yourself.
Yes.
So
yeah,
I think all this is great, Josh. Where Where can anyone learn a little bit more about you? Social media, website, anything like that?
Yeah, sure. We're on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at the Fortis Academy. Also on LinkedIn, I post a little bit more regularly there personally. And then our website is thefortisacademy.com. If anyone listening, kind of wants to have a chat or reach out to us, they can just go through that contact us page and send us a note. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate the time. Thanks to everyone for listening. See you guys next time.
Thanks, Tim.